then Drea and I were able to connect during her travels, and so she also agreed to jump in and do a presentation. So I've got both of you brilliant women on this Zoomcast today. So I'm very pleased and happy that you're both here. I usually try to put us in like a Zoom room. So let me see if I can do that. There may be a few who we can try this and see. Yeah, so it'll I guess it won't really work for this time, actually. So we'll just do a speaker, each speaker. Okay, Clarice, are you going to, did we just lose her?
Say, Livy, you're in Paris, so.
It looks like it's one of those days where I in fact, too, I had like 4 or 5 people joining the meeting at different times of the day today. So I think this whole day has been filled with gremlins. Hopefully Clarice will be able to reconnect. Drea, do you want to just jump in and start talking about Savimbo and telling us what you're all up to? It's very relevant to this question of climate solutions. It's very exciting, actually, what you're doing.
Sure, I'm happy to talk. I'm always happy to talk about it. I think I have to get screen sharing enabled though, real quick, and then I'm good to go. I can talk about Savimbo. So Savimbo is a company that does fair trade carbon credits, and I just want to explain like how we got there. I thought that'd be a little bit more fun. So I'm an MD technologist. I do high tech for hard science. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. When I was an undergrad, my favorite course was in biogeochemistry. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but it's the scientific study of Earth as an organism. So if you look at the entire planet and how it cycles carbon as a holistic whole, then what you really rapidly become aware of is that one of the most important places on the planet is tropical forests. So this is like a narrow band at the equator that stores the majority of the world's land carbon. All forests are not created equal. And I'm from the northern forests in Idaho of the US, and although I love my forests, we just don't have that big of a global impact. If you look even at the Amazon, which accounts for 25% of the world's carbon, that's one of the most influential places on Earth to look at carbon cycling. What's really important about the Amazon this year, 2021, is that while historically the Amazon has always been a global carbon sink, it might start emitting carbon. So enough of the Amazon has been deforested that the local cycles for rainfall have been disrupted, and the concern is that it will start to dry out and actually emit carbon. So there's a very big tipping point globally on the planet in the Amazon. Now, if you get even nerdier, like I did, start looking at it carefully, you can look at regions in the Amazon that are deforested and why. So Global Forest Watch is a great website. Really love them. They do satellite monitoring of trees where they're being deforested and report on it. So this is Putumayo, which is the Colombian corner of the Amazon jungle, which has lost 53% of its tree cover in the last 20 years. And if you look very carefully, 80% of the deforestation is happening on farms less than 5 hectares. Oftentimes, these are very, very small plots. Now we're going to get into something even more interesting, which is ecology, because you really can't look at the planet as an organism without considering human beings and their interaction with it. So ecology is the study of forests and humans and how they interact and how they live together. So these people that are deforesting the Amazon are small farmers. There's 2 billion of them on the planet, and about 1 billion of them live in tropical forests. And these regions usually have fairly weak governing structures and very localized economies. And of the 1 billion tropical forest farmers on the planet, historically, all they've had to sell or transact was mangoes at the local market. And right now we're at a huge tipping point globally with lots of opportunity, where these guys are suddenly massively influential in a global economy. So climate change is a $23 trillion problem because the world used to look like the left and now it looks like the right. And there are massive international markets that suddenly are available to these small farmers. So Savimbo was started in concert with 5 indigenous medicine doctors in the Colombian Amazon and a group of local small farmers who decided they wanted to conserve instead of cutting down trees. This is Johnny's Jaguar, which he has been tracking with a camera on his own for the last 10 years. They started conserving, and they didn't have any economy to support this behavior. They just did it on their own, mostly to enable Johnny's Jaguar. So this is Johnny's farm. It's right at the end of a deforestation corridor in the Putumayo Amazon. This is Johnny talking about being a conservationist and why he decided to stop hunting. And then this is Johnny's friends that he got involved. So these are small farmers. Each one of these guys owns a plot of land of about 45 hectares, 27 men representing 27 families, 27 different villages, and they pretty much cover this entire region. We designed our company by and for them. This was their idea. We went and created the company in the US for them to market conservation services. And this is some of the activities, us talking to the local mayor, research on the ground, Johnny and me designing our products, and some ecotourism and some of the medicine doctors that we work with. Now we have conservationists, so we've had them, we gave them a drone. They've been doing drone scans on their own. They've been doing TikTok videos of their conservation, and they're selling these services internationally. I think if you look at the carbon market as it exists right now in the world, there's really only 2 people who matter. There's people like Johnny and his friends, and then there's carbon brokers in like New York and Chicago. And Johnny and his friends are really doing all of the work, but they're getting 0% of the money. Whereas the brokers in New York and Chicago in the market are taking about 90% of the margin and offering 0 value. So what we wanted to do is cut them out of the market. So we vertically integrated Johnny and his friends and their services so they can sell internationally to entities of any size as a collective. We originate their carbon credits directly and they track it themselves. We pay them. So the economic models are very realistic. So it's a very sustainable model rather than like nonprofits trying to reforest and do conservation. We can actually just sell their services. We can acquire a farmer like Johnny for about $3 onto our platform, and his farm produces about $3,800 in carbon credits in 3 years. We also capture, if anybody wants to buy and resell, we capture 7% of that, and 20% of that goes back to the farmers. We have 20% in operating costs, and we try and devote as much of that as we can to operating on the ground, paying local activists and farmers and youth who want to do the services like drone scan. 60% of our profits go back into scaling. We're really interested in capturing the small farmer market. We've proven this model with a pilot. So right now our pilot, this is like 2 months ago. So now we're at 1,000 hectares. So we've already doubled in size. Which just put about $2.2 million in carbon credit revenue onto the books, which we should be able to get in 3 years. We're certifying with Sarah Carbono and Vera. We also have biochar services. So our company is a panel of activists, farmers, and we have a rocket scientist, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and DAO activists. We got involved with DAOs. And we do a weekly Sexy Tree, so you guys can sign up. I'll leave this out. So we got involved with DAOs as a way to collectively pay indigenous groups, because if you look at a large portion of the Amazon, it's collectively held land with indigenous groups who don't believe in land ownership. So we're designing and implementing a land DAO for collective payments. So 60%, the collective can enroll a plot of land, and 60% of the members get individual payments, and 50% of the money goes into collective things like roads, schools, whatever they want to vote on. But it's an autonomous, independent entity, which can be cloned and scaled anywhere in the world. So that's Savimbo. I am always happy to talk about it, and I'm happy to answer questions if you guys have any.
That's really exciting, Drea. It sounds like it's a model that you've made it work. I mean, we're coming off of the Klima DAO catastrophe of this last year and MRVs. How do you what's your take on on MRVs, and what stage of company are you in? I mean, you've obviously thought this through really well, but in terms of, you know, let's just take that one at a time. MRVs, so double selling carbon credits. What's your stance on that? How have you been able to risk manage that?
Yeah, we only work with farmers who have private land title. So these guys actually interviewed 7 different environmental organizations prior to choosing to create their own. The problem was nobody actually paid them. So a lot of these environmental organizations go there, but they don't prepay. So our economic model is we give them a small micropayment once a month, and then we give them 20% of the eventual sales. And that helps with enrollment and retention. And then they do their own tracking. So I think I've got a video here of them doing their own tracking last week, even. And so that helps them stay involved. Also, because it's private land, it's not getting double tracked.
Okay, that's interesting.
A lot of the carbon market, if you look at it, what's happening, and I've talked to a bunch of people who do this, it's North Americans can own very large plots of land in Latin America, and it's very easy to do business with one single North American. The problem is that, you know, the people who live there don't necessarily, because they're not involved in the business and they're not benefiting from it, and it's not working on their economics with their mindset, they might deforest it, uproot the trees that were planted, and that's happened a lot in Brazil, where when locals aren't involved and it's not their idea, it's really tough to run a good project.
And how did you're an MD, right? You're a doctor?
Yeah. Yeah, I took a left turn out of med school. I started doing technology. I worked in preventative medicine, and we have a consulting company we've been running for about 10 years. So everybody who works on this project who helped to design it was pulled from the consulting company. We've done cereal companies. This was the farmer's idea, and we just took it on as a pro bono project. I was really surprised to see the market potential, and then when it started to scale, we just devoted the whole company towards that. I was in the Amazon working with the indigenous medicine doctors. This is one of the titles here on indigenous health when they brought this problem to us.
Okay, so well, yeah, I mean, there is a huge relationship between climate and health, especially for indigenous communities. That's something that we try to address in you know, in terms of energy justice. I mean, climate justice is part of it. What has made you focus on South America?
We started in the Amazon with these gentlemen. We've had interest in projects from Papua New Guinea, the Congo, Uganda, all of Latin America. Like, I think I've heard from indigenous, because the medicine doctors are connected globally. Like, my medicine doctors work with indigenous groups in Australia, also in North America. So they all kind of know each other. And if you start doing good work with one group, then they'll often refer you to the other one. For us, our company's only been around for about 6 months. We want to make sure we get everything going really well and running like clockwork in one region prior to branching out to others. So we have signups from Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia right now, and they're still on the wait list until we complete the project in Putumayo.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So you're only 6 months old. What's the evolution of your company? Like, where have you found traction? Are you normally based out of Silicon Valley, or where's home base?
Yeah, I'm a digital nomad, and my consulting network is international. So we got 300 people. We call them delinquent savants. We've been working together virtually for 10 years, like I said. We get together depending on the project. We did a large COVID project for Hollywood during COVID-19. So we scaled up to 300 people on the ground in 2 countries. And then after that was done, we really like working together, but we wanted to find a project that we wanted to do. That was kind of like external people pounded on our door and asked us to do it. So we took all of our savings and launched it into something we cared about.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So you're speaking really fast. I think for somebody who doesn't come from carbon credits mindset, it might be a little hard to follow you. I'm wondering, you know, there's in the blockchain industry, as you well know, there is a huge competition now between. Do you want to stop? Yeah, there you go. There's a huge competition between, you know, for companies who are doing renewable energy credits and carbon credits. And so I'm wondering, how is it that how, how is it, like, for example, let me see if I can bring, let me see if I can open up a, there's a company that just, announced some funding. I'm not sure. I don't have it open. Oh, there it is. And they're doing completely. And because you're in the industry, I guess I'm kind of curious to see if you might know these people. Here we go. So these guys are doing RECs, so renewable energy credits. So how, explain to a non-carbon credit thinking mindset, how those two approaches compare. So you're doing carbon credit offsets, and they're doing renewable energy certificates, right?
Yeah.
How would you explain those?
Yeah, that you could think of the carbon market. So obviously the idea of a carbon market is not everybody likes the idea of a carbon market, but I think about it as accountability. It's kind of holding large financial bodies accountable for their emissions is the idea of the carbon market, whether they do so voluntarily, like they choose to offset whatever emissions they've got, or whether it's involuntary, as in they're being regulated. Ideally, it should be more involuntary, I believe. But so Shell and Chevron, some of the biggest companies in the world, were the ones that helped establish the carbon market voluntarily. And then if you think about the carbon market now today, it's basically split between two things. One is I didn't emit carbon into the atmosphere, and the other one is I took carbon out of the atmosphere. Now, globally, we need to take more carbon out than we emit. There's no question about that. And we need to do that for another 50 years at least, in order to change kind of where we're at. You could argue a lot about global temperatures rising and why, but the easiest target is obviously carbon, because we know what to do about it. We can fix it, and it's something we can transact. So a carbon credit is just 1 ton of carbon either removed from the atmosphere with a tree. Trees and algae are the best way to remove it from the atmosphere right now, or not emitted. So when you're talking about this other company that you just brought up and shared, they're basically saying we're going to stop emitting. So we're saying we've avoided emitting 1 ton of carbon, and that helps to subsidize projects like solar power. I've seen some really cool stuff at cook stoves in Africa. There's lots of different ways to kind of like subsidize technologies that reduce emissions, and everybody wants companies to reduce emissions first and then offset later. My company and our whole incentive was to try and stop the deforestation in its tracks. And anywhere that we deploy in the Amazon, we immediately stop deforestation. And the way that we do that is we get money from people who can't stop emissions. So for instance, I talked to a very large port of an international city recently, and their whole ocean freight, ocean liners, they're just emitting, and there's no real way to turn that business on its head right away. So for them, they can at least monetize pulling the carbon back out. But, companies like Microsoft, Stripe, they're really leading the charge and going zero emissions, and we love them, and that's what we want to be doing. So I think right now, if you want to look at changing things quickly, we have to be doing both, taking carbon out and also reducing emissions. It shouldn't be one or the other. The best companies that I like are all enrolled in something called Science-Based Targets Initiative. It's a voluntary enrollment, and they help companies reduce their carbon footprint, voluntarily change their acquisition, their supply chain. There's lots of different things you can do. It's tough for companies to even calculate what their emissions are. That's a whole nother industry, is like even figuring out what you are emitting. We like to enable consumers, if they want to, they can help support our farmers and reduce some of their emissions. But really, at the end of the day, we need to do both. I'm laser focused on doing one thing, which is stopping deforestation, by tapping into these global markets. But I don't have any value judgment on people who want to go reduction first. I think that's great. Everybody needs to be doing what they can do.
Gotcha. Also, I want to invite anybody in the audience who wants to participate in the conversation. Please feel free to just unmute and then turn on your video, and then you can jump into the conversation. I know there's a couple of people here, a few people very engaged in impact and things like that. So it'd be great to have your participation. Let's then talk a little bit about the blockchain, like how how is the blockchain, because that's kind of the focus of today's workshop is, why science, why blockchain, why DAO now. So Frontier DAO, our DAO, is its whole premise is that through using blockchain, we can make we can construct more collaborative systems for science. We can protect intellectual property through publishing on the blockchain. We can enable interdisciplinary sort of cross-pollination. What about your field? Like, what's your approach? How has blockchain enabled your business model and your conservation efforts?
Yeah, so blockchain's a tough topic now. As a technologist, I think about the Gartner hype cycle. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but basically a new technology gets overhyped and then people get really disappointed in it. And then they're like, it's no good. But then after a while, they realize, oh, it's good for these things. And we've seen that with AI. And right now, blockchain is kind of like peaked on the overhype. And it's on the downslope as far as people getting disillusioned. But to me, as a technologist, I just think that means it's about to yield on the things that it's actually useful for. So I've been working with blockchain for probably 6 to 7 years as a technologist, and we just look at it for certain use cases. We tend to pick and choose our emerging technology depending on what project we're working on. So we actually do use blockchain to track our credits. It helps us to incentivize small scale ownership and resale. But we don't talk about that with everybody because not everybody is friendly to blockchain. Obviously, this crowd is. I was an ambassador for BitDAO for a while, which is one of the world's largest DAOs, founded by Peter Thiel. And I did a lot of work with them with open science. So I like blockchain for the idea of transparent accounting and collective land ownership. So to me, it really has a lot of applicability to collective ownership and transparent accounting, which is what we use it for. Right now, so if you want to look at carbon markets on blockchain, yeah, I'm of two minds. When people tell me that they're selling carbon credits on chain, I say, who are you selling it to? Because if you're selling it to a body like Shell that's then retiring the credit, like burning it and saying we've canceled out our emissions, that's a marketplace. If you're selling it to a naive buyer, that's a Ponzi scheme. and so far, most of the carbon transactions, unfortunately, in blockchain have been to more naive buyers. I don't see a lot of industrial buyers like ports, that kind of thing. So the marketplace that I see isn't there. That said, I do want to put a huge shout out, and I'm a huge fan of ClimateDAO, because they were climate activists. And when they bought up Toucan and ClimateDAO, went and bought up a lot of the bad carbon credits on the market, things that were created about 20 years ago that were really they weren't that scientifically accurate. And they sucked all those credits into the blockchain. A lot of them completely lost value and vaporized, but it had the effect on the market, which is the intended effect, which was driving up the prices, forcing emitting bodies to now buy credits under tighter standards for higher prices that sequester more carbon. So it was a globally beneficial effect. I'm a huge fan of ClimateDAO and Toucan for that reason. We don't sell our end credits on chain. We sell them only to retiring bodies, but we do transact them. We let people buy and resell them on chain.
Okay, well, that's an important distinction. Oh, so that's a very interesting analysis from your perspective about Klima. I attended a sustainable blockchain summit this last summer, and a couple of the people from those entities and a bunch of others, were there. And so there were different perspectives shared on that. if I'm not mistaken, Klima, one of the founders of Klima is, or one of the major investors was the gentleman behind WeWork initially or something, I think.
Adam Newman, yeah, he did another one recently with Flow Carbon. I think Andreessen Horowitz put a bunch of money behind it. The problem is most people who aren't transacting in the main market. So a few of my friends they're just minting 3 million Vera certified units this year. UN Red Project in a tropical forest, highly reputable. And what they've told me is that their experience has been that reputation is everything. Like you literally can't sell to the big emitters if your reputation isn't crystal clean. And if it isn't, then you have to go get a broker to represent you. So unfortunately, it's really tough right now to transact in the main market if you're working in blockchain just because of a reputation issue. That said, I only think it's been beneficial to the carbon markets. If you know, I'm an environmentalist, so I just want to see deforestation stop, forests healthy, animals preserved, you know, all the good stuff. And so I don't think it's been a negative effect. It just hasn't necessarily been financially sustainable for everybody who bought credits on chain.
Okay. Right. Interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about what you were doing as you said you were like a spokesperson or an ambassador for Peter Thiel's BitDAO. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I got involved with them. I started pitching them for Savimbo originally because we were going to be doing everything on chain and I thought we could sell on chain. And then I started repping for them. So I did a bunch of articles for them on DeFi and decentralized finance on chain and as well as open science. So I used to be a part of Stanford's meta research community. So that's research on research. And there's a lot of work on like now that all these institutional academic databases have been digitized, it's really obvious to be able to go and look for ghost authorship and all kinds of other like research metrics. In psychology, for instance, there's been a reproducibility crisis where they tried to reproduce the scientific canon and were unable to for about 60% of the studies. It's a great study in Nature, but I'm really interested in blockchain for research papers and for academic databases.
Well, that's it. That's interesting. That's actually that's actually one of our projects. In fact, that's our flagship project. It's Frontier Registry, and we have a little bit of backing from Polygon, and it's an on-chain publishing platform for scientific and engineering research. So on chain. If I can bring up the video, I could share the little explainer video. So that's interesting about what you were just saying about 60%. That was just in psychology. Were there any other disciplines?
It's a brilliant paper. They did let me see if I got this right. It's Open Science Initiative. It was published in Nature or Science. I can't remember which one, but they basically took a lot of the psychology canon that's in like University 101 textbooks and tried to reproduce the studies, and they were unable to reproduce it. It's a brilliant example of open science because like there was no individual author on the paper, but it really, really, really changed psychology and what they consider to be like truth in psychology. I wish they did that in medicine. The numbers, I don't know if you guys have, obviously you're fans of this, so I don't know if you've read John Ioannidis's paper, which is called Why Most Published Research is False.
Oh.
It's out of Stanford. It helped to launch this meta research community, and they looked at like the statistical biases in scientific papers at a systematic level. So there's a lot that can be done. And I think that open science presents a really interesting, and blockchain specifically presents an interesting mechanism to do more. So I put the article up that I wrote for BitDAO about open science. And I think I have one more. That one's about Sci-Hub. And I don't know if you guys know Alexandra Eichmann. She's one of my heroes, but she took like every research paper and put it publicly on the web, which, you know, there are two minds. She's a hacker from Kazakhstan. She couldn't afford to access research.
Yeah. Cool. So you put that in the chat for all of us?
Yeah, I'm gonna put the other one about Alexandra.
Cool. Okay, I'm just getting the video booted up. Let me see.
Frontier Registry.
I am familiar with that paper that you just referenced. I think that was from 2018, correct?
Yeah, and I went to his first, he had a conference and I went to his first one and I was just like blown away. It was amazing. I will add the open science. I hope I'm not data spewing, overwhelming you guys with.
Oh no, well people can look at it, or people can choose not to, but better to have more choice than less choice. No, you're a fountain of knowledge, Drea. This is you're
I'm a total nerd.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm gonna mute myself for a second while I get the video queued up.
Okay, there's the open science paper. So yeah, I really think DAOs are gonna like revolutionize how scientists collaborate.
Yeah, so do we. Let me share, and I'll share with you what we're working on. We're actually right in the middle of a build right now. So here's our explainer video.
An on-chain publishing platform. It gives researchers, scientists, engineers, and academics the tools they need to self-publish their work immutably on the blockchain. Let me explain. Consider this: Nikola Tesla, best known for his inventions and contributions to the advancement of electricity, obtained around 300 patents worldwide for his discoveries. However, it was Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla's former employer, who went on to build an empire based on Tesla's core research. Tesla himself died in poverty in a New York hotel room. What if proof of his work had been recorded and stored in a transparent, fully accessible way that simultaneously authenticated his IP ownership? These are issues still relevant today, and with even greater challenges. Scientific research is often published behind a paywall. The authors are charged upfront fees to publish their work. They have no revenue share in their published work, and they must give up copyright upon publication. The solution is simple and made available with FrontierRegistry, an open source, on-chain publishing platform. We utilize the latest in blockchain technology to ensure there is an immutable, transparent date timestamp of all published work. We ensure that scientists, researchers, engineers, anyone who chooses to publish their intellectual property has the option to charge for their work, with earned revenue going directly back to the intellectual property owner, not the middleman, and without the need to ever give up copyright to their research or IP. FrontierRegistry is unlocking the power of the best innovators to publish and collaborate with safety and confidence, knowing their IP rights are secure. Yeah, you can become a beta tester. Visit frontierregistry.card.co.
Okay, hey, thanks everyone for sitting through that, watching that. But you know, it really does open up. Why Drea? Hang on. Sounds like something else is starting. Let me mute. Okay, got the rock got the rock song muted. Why would you say, like, what's your perspective? Why do you think blockchain is going to open up science to different levels, to different degrees?
Well, I like the idea of paying collectives when it comes to science. We kind of have these pyramidal structures in science, and anybody who's done advanced scientific work knows what it's like to get your name left off of a research paper. When it comes to authorship credit and authorship metrics, we don't really incentivize these large scale studies like this reproducibility one. And that's a really tough one for all the academics that contributed to that, which has a huge impact on the science of psychology. They aren't going to get tenure out of that. Their names aren't, they're not really getting credit for it. So things like sequencing the human genome in this reproducibility study, you need collectives to do it. And a lot of our science really isn't getting done. Like we're not incentivizing necessarily science the way we could. So the benefit of DAOs, I think, are for collective action or collective credit. Also, it enables you potentially to like put more than just like one author on a research paper. I think once I published a paper out of Stanford and we had co-first authors, and we really we split the co-first author work down the middle, but we could not publish the paper as co-first authors. It was just unable to. And that really made me start to think about like how people contribute to science and how they're credited. And there's all kinds of evidence that people get ghost authorship all the time. So that was an issue for me. I think the other issue is like paywalling. It's just a huge issue. So I have a strange relationship with formal education. I was homeschooled and I tested into university. I walked out of the woods and tested into university at the age of 18. And then I just kind of skipped degrees. I think I only ever got the MD and then I ended up doing a postdoc, but I didn't complete it. So my education is, I just have the one degree. I didn't do a master's or PhD or anything. So, and having like really worked at a lot of different, I think I've been to 10 different universities now that I've worked in. The last one I believe was Stanford. And so I've contributed to science, but I don't always get these credentials and these credits. And for our consulting agency, half of our contributors, we hire high IQ individuals with neurodiversity. Half of them don't have degrees, but they're definitely working at the same level. So we have like people with advanced degrees like me, or rocket scientists, the Nobel Prize winner, but we also work with people who like are post-incarcerated or autistic, and they're just not going to be getting this degree or necessarily have this public reputation. And when you look at contribution, it's often unevenly incentivized, and it's so delineated by socioeconomic factors. So Alexandra, I don't know if you guys know Aaron Schwartz. He was like a very famous hacker from Harvard. He tried to open up academic databases, and he was prosecuted to like the full extent of the law and ended up committing suicide. He's a big hero to the community, and people know about him, but they don't necessarily know about Alexandra, a woman from Kazakhstan who actually did open academic databases. So we oftentimes don't get credit to the people who do deserve it.
Yeah. Aaron Schwartz that's a sad story. Tell us more about Alexandra, about how she opened up academic databases.
She's my favorite. She was a graduate researcher in Kazakhstan, and her university was too poor to pay for her papers. So she ended up just hacking the academic databases to get access. And then she got a little bit mad, and she was like, there's so many people around the world who could be contributing to science, but they can't afford to access the work that's already being done. And that's such a waste of resources when most of the science is paid for with public funds anyway. So she hacked it, made it available on the web, and it's been available for a long time, mostly running with other scientists who give her their login credentials to their universities. She's been taking payment in Bitcoin for this since like 2011. So she's a total badass, and I wish that everybody knew about her, because I think all of us love Aaron and wish that it had gone better for him. But I feel like we also owe it to Alexandra to like support her in her work, I think at a more institutional level. The problem is, if you look at the function that large journals do serve, which is like validation. And if we incentivized, one of the issues with science right now is we don't incentivize peer review. You don't get paid for it at all. And so it's tough for people to put time into it. It's one of the things that we could also incentivize with blockchain.
We couldn't agree more. Yeah, we couldn't agree more. There's a huge issue with peer review, both lack of incentivization, and also once you're moving that into a digital world and onto the blockchain, how do we make it Sybil resistant, right? That's something that we're really working through right now. Do you have any thoughts coming from academic research on how peer review can be incentivized? And also I want to back up a few points. You said that you couldn't do a co-first author.
Thank you.
Why?
Most journals will only accept one first author. Yeah, you actually have to like put one first author, and they won't make it a co-first author credit. And I think that's very telling. For some disciplines it works, like for history, you know, that's mostly always just one author, just as part of the discipline. But for medicine, really almost no research study is ever done as an individual. And when we just say this person did everything, we put a lot of the workload onto one person, or we ended up just obscuring who's doing the actual work. So I have another article, I will put it in. It was just about advanced authorship metrics and how we should be looking at more sophisticated methods. But the nice thing about blockchain is you could potentially, and you could distribute credit, but also distribute funding a little bit differently. So, and anybody who's ever been to med school knows that, you know, if you don't have a certain, like they literally, there's this like thing like authorship inflation. And it's really bad in medicine, especially. There's a lot of totally bogus papers published because you almost have to get a certain like 15 papers as a first author in order to get into certain competitive residencies and stuff like that. And it just ends up being a game of attrition where you're not really doing good science. You're just trying to get you maneuver to get your name on things. And so I was fortunate to work with really, really good researchers at UCSF and Stanford, and they're very good at negotiating authorship credit at the time the work is done, which is how it should be done. But I've seen it done very poorly at other institutions. So I would love to see some reform on that front.
This is such an interesting conversation, you know, especially, you know, for us, because we're right in the middle of the build here, and we want to you know, address so many points that are real pain points from people, but without taking any stakeholdership. So it's not like we're going to privilege one university over another, because we don't come from that universe. Well, I mean, we come from a research world, but we're not entrenched in you know, a certain school at Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, to, you know, for example, which I feel gives us a bit of an autonomous viewpoint. I get solicitations every once in a while from NASA. I'm on their mailing list, so to be peer review for some of the you know, proposals that are being submitted. And you know, every once in a while there'll be like a stipend of like maybe $50 or something per proposal reviewed. But again, that's not academic review. That's more of a RFP review, right? Request for proposal review. What do you have? What's your analysis on using, you know, coin or dollar as incentivization? Is that workable, or is that just kind of is that a dead end? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm not the best expert on this. There are some really amazing researchers. From PLOS. I think I don't remember who it was, but anybody, if you want to look at the best people on this topic, it's anybody that's involved in the Meta Research Initiative from Stanford. There's scientists from all over the world. And a lot of them have done some amazing stuff on authorship reform and how to look at ghost authors and incentivize peer review. So I really like their work. But I personally think that peer reviewers should be included in like proceeds from citations. I think it should be based on citations. And then I also would love to see more incorporation of Google Scholar metrics, like back into remuneration for scientists and credit. It's interesting when you look at scientists, because you really want them to be kind of like inversely, especially coming from, so right now I work at the intersection of medicine, science, and technology. And one of the things that really never really crosses the pond is academics are not incentivized for output, and you don't really want them to be. You want them to be independent so that they can have negative findings. That's really critical. And so you really need academics to be incentivized independently of their published work, I think. But
Yeah, couldn't agree more. No, this is such a nuanced conversation. Really loving it. What are, you know, we can kind of start to wrap up a little bit, maybe give a couple minutes of time back to you and the audience. And again, apologies that about my technical difficulties at the very beginning of the meeting. But how can we go forward? You know, another interesting thing too that I wanted to bring up with you, if you don't mind, and that is that, so our perspective at FrontierDAO is really a long vision. So we're looking at fusion energy as the climate solution. That doesn't answer to what's going on right now. So what you're doing is really answering to the situation that we have today, right? Which is, it's a crucial approach. What we're looking at is in 10 years time, right? Especially if we can still avail ourselves, if we can continue to avail ourselves of quantum computing, the Frontier quantum computer out of the Tennessee Oak Ridge Lab, et cetera, seems to really be accelerating research in fusion energy and other areas. So we are of the mindset, or of the opinion, with a growing number of people now, that fusion energy will be a reality. It's no longer, you know, a pipe dream or a fantastical holy grail. So, you know, that said, what are ways that somebody with your initiatives, you know, for carbon, you know, carbon credits, more or less carbon capture, right? How can we work together with you while still furthering our sort of long-term vision of, like, we feel that by 2035, let's say, fusion energy will be commercially deployable. It will provide a clean, green baseload energy source for communities all around the globe. And you know, the big thing that we're messaging on right now is to get people to be aware that fusion energy is not fission. So nuclear fusion is the opposite of nuclear fission. So there's actually no radiation, or very little, relatively very little radiation produced by nuclear fusion. Wondering how we can go lockstep in hand. Like, how can we support your efforts for this sort of next 10 to 15 years, while we, you know, gear up to get people to build to architect a system where people can have stakeholdership in fusion energy as a source for the planet. I'm throwing a lot at you there, but you have a very
no, that's right. I've been actually, I got in a fight with a physicist about fusion a month ago. I was like, it's gonna happen. He's like, nope, never gonna happen. I was like, well, I'm gonna go figure it out, because I've been following quantum computing for a while. I worked with nuclear power about 5 years ago. So if you look at base grids, energy systems, emissions, there's not much that can power a base grid. So you can have a lot of solar and wind, and it's great, but it doesn't really solve the huge problem of like coal-fired power plants. So the only alternative right now is nuclear. I would love to see fusion energy like up and running. I think even if we fixed it tomorrow, we fixed all of our energy problems tomorrow, we would still have penetration into the Amazon, and we'd still be dealing with like global climate effects. And so really cleaning up the atmosphere is a long-term proposition. So I'm not going to be out of work anytime soon, even if we do come up with a great clean energy source. And so I don't see any inherent competition. I think both things need to be done. As far as fusion, yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to keep arguing with physicists till it happens. I'm 100% behind it. I read that book called 13 Scientific Mysteries about, oh God, it was like 12 years ago, and I got obsessed with it. Because I was really interested in the fact, especially if you're really into science, you realize that there's like gray zones where people just won't look, like questions that they won't ask because it's unpopular, or it's assumed that it's never going to be solved. And those kind of areas of science really interest me.
Yeah, well, cool. That's great. Well, so another fusion person. Love that. Yeah, true. Those gray zones. You know, again, when people's reputation and careers are staked on, you know, not being too much on the fringe, yeah, how can you, how can you pursue certain areas? Thankfully though, you know, fusion is going mainstream. I mean, so many people now are saying, you know, a few people now are saying fusion is the new space race. So, yeah, I'd love to maybe in an offline conversation, I'd love to hear a recap of that conversation you had with that physicist. There are still a couple of camps, but on this workshop series, we've had you know, some really big organizational representatives already present now on fusion. We had a gentleman from ITER, the big intergovernmental consortium here in the south of France, spoke last week, and then the week before there was the person from Eurofusion, which is kind of like Europe's National Science Foundation for fusion energy. So we've had some really terrific speakers so far on that topic specifically. So yeah, so you're definitely in a friendly camp here. Yeah, any final thoughts? Yeah, so yeah, we've got about 1 minute. I want to thank you very much, Drea, for sticking with us here.
This was fun. I have to go to another meeting, but yeah, if you guys want to help my farmers out, then we have I'll just give you my link. We have a thing for friends, so you can like just give us a Google review or say something nice or like something we do, and it definitely helps them. It just encourages them. So I think when we look at the stars, I work with a lot of this new space community too. When we look at the stars, we need to think about who's kind of on the other end of our human spectrum. So there's still something to be said for this like very close relationship with nature and non-technological lifestyles. So just gonna give you my farmers. Yeah. So
yeah, please do.
Yeah, say something.
Excellent. Yeah. Your website is very clear. It's very easy to understand. So so great. Yeah, I'll share that. I'll tweet that back out and share it on LinkedIn and stuff as well.
Yeah, we love friends. I'm so glad that we got to make friends. If you guys have any questions, I'll give you my LinkedIn. I'm always happy to nerd out. I'm doing my best to focus. You know how it is when you're a founder, like especially when you're like me and you like to, you know, brain candy everywhere. So I'm trying to focus on what I'm doing right now, but yeah, always happy to nerd out. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Safe travels there in South America, and obviously you're gonna just knock them out of the water for your TEDx talk. You've done so good today. It's been so fascinating.
Yeah, I'll just stay on one topic, but next talk I can do cold fusion. You guys need to have that ready for me.
Deal.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Bye for now.